If you have visited the city of Liverpool in the northwest of England, you might have walked down past Liverpool 1 shopping centre towards the Albert Docks. And en route, you might have stopped off for a rest at the Chavasse Park alongside John Lewis. And if you've given it any thought at all, you might wonder why it's called Chavasse Park. If you look carefully, you can find a plaque. It will tell you it's named after Noel Chavasse, an adopted son of Liverpool who won the Victoria Cross not once, but twice during the First World War. What most people, even reading that notice, won't realise is just what an incredible feat that is. Since the Victoria Cross was instituted in the 1850s, it's only been awarded 1,358 times, which, considering the amount of men and women who've served in the British Armed Forces during that period, not least in the two World Wars, means it takes a special sort of person doing something particularly courageous to become a recipient. So imagine what it takes to be awarded the Victoria Cross twice. It is so rare for that to happen that only 3 people have ever been awarded double VCs in over 160 years. And this is the story of one of those rare men, a war hero who not only achieved that distinction, but was also a doctor with a first-class degree from Oxford University, and who represented his country at the Olympics. This is the story of Captain Noel Chavasse VC, the only double VC winner in the First World War. Noel Godfrey Chavasse was born in Oxford on the 9th of November 1884. He was the son of Edith and Francis, a clergyman, from a family that had emigrated from France to England back in the early 1700s. His identical twin brother, Christopher, had been born just 20 minutes earlier. In 1900, the Reverend Francis was appointed Bishop of Liverpool, and the Chavasse family headed from Oxford to the northwest of England. At the time, the port of Liverpool was one of the great arteries between Britain and her empire, and indeed North America. The city was to adopt Noel Chavasse and the rest of the family as one of their own, as you will hear about in this story. 4 years later, both Noel and Christopher obtained places at Oxford University, which was an impressive achievement, as both brothers had, at school, been more interested in sport than academia. Thus, it was even more impressive when in 1907 Noel graduated with a first-class degree. With 1 degree under his belt, he then decided to study medicine. It wasn't a completely bizarre move. Medicine and surgery were effectively in his blood. His grandfather, Thomas Chavasse, had been a surgeon, and whilst his son, Noel's father, Francis, had entered the church, his other son, also called Thomas, followed his father into medicine. Noel's uncle Thomas became a renowned surgeon at Birmingham General Hospital and was actually knighted for his services. So, having completed 1 degree, Noel spent the next 5 years studying to gain a medical degree. During that time, he joined the University Officer Training Corps in the medical unit. More of that in a while. But before we talk about the First World War, there's another story about Noel Chavasse that I want to share with you. As I said earlier, both twins had always excelled at sport whilst at school. And this continued at university, where both brothers gained blues in athletics, competing for Oxford against Cambridge University. In the 440 yards race, they completed a 1-2 for Oxford, with Christopher crossing the line ahead of his brother. In the 100 yard sprint, Noel was involved in a dead heat finish with his rival from Cambridge. With that sort of record, it might not come as a surprise that, in those days of amateur sportsmen, both Chavasse twins were chosen to represent Great Britain at the 1908 Olympics. So here we have 2 sons of a bishop, committed Christians in their own rights, who would go on to both be decorated for bravery in the First World War, competing in the Olympics. I mean, it's like Chariots of Fire meets Hacksaw Ridge. And before anyone asks if they were the inspiration for the film Chariots of Fire, the answer is no. That film told the story of Harold Abrahams and Eric Liddell at the Paris Olympics in 1924. The 1908 Olympics were the first time the modern games had come to London. In a commentator's nightmare, both Noel and Christopher competed in the 400 metres. Fortunately, they were in separate heats. Unfortunately, both twins failed to make the final. Noel Chavasse being beaten by American William Robbins. And Robbins went on to win the final. But fellow American John Carpenter was alleged to have obstructed the British athlete Wyndham Halswell. Carpenter was disqualified, and the Olympic officials ordered the final to be rerun. Robbins, the original winner, and fellow American John Taylor refused to run. And therefore, with no other competitors turning up for the final, the gold medal was awarded to Halswell. It's the only walkover gold medal in Olympic history. You knew I'd go down one of my famous rabbit holes at some stage, didn't you? Oh, and just for the record, that other American athlete who refused to rerun the final, John Taylor, would go on to be part of the gold-winning US medley relay team at the same games, and consequently became the first black American man to win Olympic gold. Anyway, after all the excitement of the 1908 Olympics, both brothers returned to university. Upon passing his final medical exams in 1912, Noel gained his first medical placement at the Royal Southern Hospital in Liverpool. Do you remember from earlier in this talk that Noel had joined the Officer Training Corps at university? Well, in June 1913 he enlisted in the Royal Army Medical Corps. Just over a year later, the First World War broke out, and Lieutenant Noel Chavasse was attached to the 10th Battalion of the King's Regiment, the Liverpool Scottish. Both his twin brother Christopher and his two other brothers, Bernard and Aidan, were to serve their country in the war, as indeed were his sisters, in nursing capacities. You probably won't be surprised to find out that a man who had obtained a first-class degree from Oxford, represented his country in the Olympics, and come from a family of eminent surgeons, was not shy at expressing his opinions. 30-year-old Chavasse crossed swords with his superiors, complaining about the organisation of field ambulances, the rampant spread of venereal disease amongst the troops, and the poor treatment of shell shock victims. His outspoken comments were an indication of just how passionately he cared about his men and his duty as a medical officer. Later in the war, he was offered a position at a hospital away from the front lines, but he refused, writing, "It's too comfortable. Young fellows like myself ought to be with the fighting men." And with the fighting men, he certainly was. In June 1915, recently promoted to the rank of captain, Chavasse was with the 10th Battalion, Liverpool Scottish, at the Battle of Hooge, just outside Ypres, in Belgium. His battalion were in the thick of the action. Only 124 of the 540 men escaped death or injury. Chavasse himself spent 12 hours in no man's land, rescuing 15 seriously wounded men. During the long night that he worked with his stretcher bearers, they had a close encounter with a German patrol creeping out from their own positions. The Germans came so close that Chavasse picked up a spade to defend himself. In the event, the Germans passed them by, and the former Olympian was able to continue his rescue mission. For his actions at the Battle of Hooge, he was awarded the Military Cross. In early 1916, Noel Chavasse returned to England on leave. He actually spent the time at his uncle's house at Barnt Green in Worcestershire. His uncle, Sir Thomas, who had been a leading surgeon at Birmingham General Hospital, had died just before the war, but his aunt, Lady Chavasse, had kept the family medical tradition alive by establishing a convalescent home for wounded soldiers nearby. It was whilst in Worcestershire that Noel fell in love and proposed to his cousin, Gladys. 9 years his junior, Gladys had joined the Voluntary Aid Detachment, supporting her mother at the convalescent home. The Voluntary Aid Detachment has a fascinating story in itself. Tens of thousands of women served with the VAD during both the First World War and the Second World War, acting as nurses both in Britain and in the theatres of war. Over 200 were killed in the First World War, and over 1,000 were mentioned in dispatches. Notable volunteers included Vera Brittain, Agatha Christie, and Violet Jessop, who survived the Titanic disaster. Maybe the VAD is worth a video in its own right. What do you think? Please comment below. Anyway, both Gladys, her sister, and Noel's sisters from Liverpool all served in the VAD. Wedding plans, however, would have to wait. Captain Chavasse was on his way back to the Western Front, and the Battle of the Somme. In Britain, most people are aware of the first day of the Battle of the Somme, 1st of July 1916, when 57,000 British soldiers were killed or wounded in just 24 hours. Now, to put that into context, total Allied losses on D-Day were below 10,000. What a lot of people don't realise is that the Battle of the Somme lasted for over 4 months and only ended in November 1916. The Liverpool Scottish didn't go into action until the end of July. Chavasse recorded in a letter home, "I expect the next few days to be busy ones. I've not got that gay feeling in these sorts of do's as I had 18 months ago. I'm sick at heart at seeing so many men, and especially my men, go under." The war was already taking a toll on the Chavasse family too. Gladys's only brother, Arthur Chavasse, who like cousin Noel was a captain in the Royal Army Medical Corps, had died of pneumonia early in the war. Noel's younger brother would be killed later on. Oh, and as an aside, speaking of death in the First World War, Wyndham Halswell, the winner of the 400-metre gold medal back in the 1908 Olympics? Well, he was killed by a German sniper at the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle in 1915. On the 8th of August 1916, the Liverpool Scottish were part of the assault on Guillemont during the ongoing Battle of the Somme. Once more their losses were heavy. Once more Noel Chavasse tended the wounded. Once more he put his life on the line going out into no man's land to rescue the injured. And he had plenty of work at Guillemont. Of the 600 NCOs and other ranks in their battalion, 261, over 40%, were killed, wounded or reported missing. And of the 20 officers, just 3 remained unscathed. For over 4 hours that night, armed with a torch and whistle, he searched for survivors in no man's land. His quest to rescue his men took him to within 25 yards of the German lines, which, when using a torch and a whistle, attracted a fair few enemy shots. The following morning, accompanied by one of his stretcher bearers, he ventured out again. In the maelstrom of no man's land, Chavasse was wounded in the side by a shell splinter. Nevertheless, despite his own injury, he and his comrade were able to carry a desperately wounded soldier 500 yards to safety as bullets flew around them. Another stretcher bearer wrote afterwards, "At times it was impossible to stand up without being hit, but the captain took no more notice of the enemy's fire than he would of a few drops of rain. He made us all feel it was an honour to work with him." Having worked all day and night, Chavasse had rescued 20 badly wounded men from no man's land. For these actions, Captain Noel Chavasse was awarded the Victoria Cross, the UK's highest military medal for valour. When an officer arrived to tell him the good news, he found the medical post deserted. Hunting around, he eventually found Chavasse behind a tent, washing his stretcher bearer's socks for them. Now, before I go on, if you're enjoying my work, then please consider becoming a patron so I can research and produce more stories for you. There will be a link at the end, and there's also one in the description below. Chavasse was presented with his VC by King George V at Buckingham Palace early the following year. It was around this time that he was offered that post in the hospital that I mentioned earlier. With an eye to the future, Chavasse was tempted, not to avoid the carnage of the front line, but so that he could improve his skills in orthopaedic surgery, which he could use in peacetime. Yet, his sense of duty led him to turn that opportunity down and return to his men. Almost exactly a year after the Somme, the Liverpool Scottish were once more marching towards one of the great battles on the Western Front. 90 miles north of the Somme lay the Belgian city of Ypres. There had already been 2 battles fought near the city, costing 300,000 casualties. Now in 1917 it was once more to be the site of yet another Allied offensive. This third Battle of Ypres is more often known as the Battle of Passchendaele. Chavasse joined the men of the 10th Battalion King's Regiment, the Liverpool Scottish, on a 5-mile march towards the front in torrential rain. Whilst he prepared for this latest offensive, Noel heard that his brother Aidan had been killed in action, serving with another battalion of the King's Regiment. In an ironic twist, the Army Medical Corps officer leading the search for Aidan's body was none other than their brother Bernard. He, like Noel, had followed in the family medical tradition. Meanwhile, Noel's twin brother Christopher had followed in their father's footsteps, becoming an ordained priest at the same time that Noel was working in the hospital in Liverpool before the war. As a priest in Lancashire, Christopher played on the wing for the rugby league club St Helens, earning the nickname the Flying Curate. With the outbreak of the war, Christopher, like the other Chavasse boys, signed up to serve his country. In his case, he served as an army chaplain and was to be awarded the Military Cross. So, it was probably with a sense of sadness as well as duty that Captain Noel Chavasse VC marched towards Ypres. Just before 4 a.m. on the 31st of July 1917, the Battle of Passchendaele commenced. Just as at the Battle of the Somme, Chavasse was in the thick of things, directing his men to locate wounded soldiers and to carry them to safety. During these early hours, he was once more hit by shrapnel. Refusing to be sent back to a field hospital, he patched himself up as best he could and stayed where he felt he could be most useful, on the front line and in no man's land. During the following 2 days, he was hit at least once more, but some accounts say 3 times, by shrapnel, but he still worked on treating the wounded. At his first aid post, Chavasse worked tirelessly, supported, somewhat bizarrely, by a captured German medical officer, whilst a queue of injured soldiers waited patiently outside in the rain to be treated. Finally, he was able to grab some rest in the early hours of the 2nd of August. He'd been on the go for 48 hours non-stop. At 3 a.m. on the 2nd of August, a German shell scored a direct hit on the first aid post, killing and injuring all those inside. Noel Chavasse somehow survived, but with up to half a dozen injuries, including, most seriously, a gash to his abdomen, which was bleeding profusely. Despite these injuries, the almost unidentifiable Chavasse now crawled half a mile to request assistance for his wounded men back at the post. Finally, Noel Chavasse was taken from the front line to a hospital. Despite briefly rallying on the 3rd, his condition deteriorated and he was given last communion. As the life sapped out of this incredible man, he asked a nurse to write a letter to his fiancée, Gladys. He spoke of his love for her and his regret they'd not married. His letter ended, "Duty called, and called me to obey." 32-year-old Captain Noel Chavasse died at 1 p.m. on the 4th of August 1917, exactly 3 years to the day that the British had entered the war. For his incredible bravery at Passchendaele, he was awarded a 2nd Victoria Cross. He was the only British serviceman to be awarded the VC twice during the First World War, and only one of 3 ever to receive that honour. His father, the Reverend Francis Chavasse, the Bishop of Liverpool, lost 2 of his 4 sons in this war, Noel and Aidan. After the war, Noel's twin brother Christopher remained a Church of England clergyman and would ultimately become the Bishop of Rochester. He named his eldest son after his fallen twin, and that Noel Chavasse would serve on the staff of Field Marshal Montgomery during the Second World War. The other brother, Bernard, would become a surgeon like his father and grandfather, a career that Noel was destined for, but deprived of. Meanwhile, Gladys would eventually marry. During the Second World War, she once more served in the Voluntary Aid Detachment and was mentioned in dispatches at Monte Cassino in Italy. Nationally, Noel Chavasse VC has been commemorated on postage stamps and coins. He's also remembered in his adopted home city of Liverpool to this day. A fine statue of Chavasse carrying a wounded soldier to safety stands in Abercrombie Square, where the Chavasse family used to live when his father was the Bishop of Liverpool. And in the very retail and tourist heart of the city lies Chavasse Park. And whilst there is this small information post there, I wonder how many people who sit there enjoying the sun and their ice creams realise the incredible story of Noel Chavasse. His bravery during the First World War, and that he is just one of 3 men ever to have been awarded Britain's highest military honour, twice. Captain Noel Chavasse Victoria Cross and Bar, not forgetting a military cross too, is buried at the military cemetery at the Brandhoek near Ypres. His gravestone can be identified by 2 Victoria Crosses etched onto it. It also bears the words, "Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." Well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this story and found it interesting too. And if you enjoy my work, then please consider becoming a patron so I can research and produce more stories for you. Don't forget to give me a like, add a comment about future topics you want me to cover, and watch the other videos on my channel. Loads more planned, so until the next time, thanks for your support, keep well, and I hope to see you very soon.